It was 1953. My brother and I were sitting at the edge of the swimming hole, barely dipping our toes.
You gotta believe me, Doug. If you don't, nobody will.
Tim's eyes were watery. I've never seen him like this before. He was a tough kid. The only other time I remember him crying was when he nearly broke his leg trying to climb up Dodge's Hill.
Tim, that just doesn't make any sense. You know that, right? It's probably just an old hobo. There's loads of them around. He was no hobo, Doug. Cross my heart.
His small hands made a crossing gesture over his chest. Tim had just finished telling me about a man he'd seen at the swimming hole a couple of days ago. He'd been alone that day, but wanted to try some fishing just the same. He said that he'd stuck his rod into the mud and went to get some sandwiches under the tree close to the bank. He gestured to the trees as he said this. It was about 20 feet away, gently swaying in the summer breeze. When he turned back around, there was a man standing at the shore. Tim described him to me.
He was wearing a suit like one of Daddy's. With a hollow voice, he asked,
"Never seen a hobo wearing a suit, have you?"
The man's fingers were long and wrinkled, and his feet were bare. Water fell from his arms and body like streams, and it wouldn't stop. The worst part was his eyes. What was wrong with his eyes? He didn't have any. All that was there were sunken pits, horrible and empty, and somehow...
Tim said he could feel the man wanting.
Wanting what?
Tim was silent for a moment, then finally said,
I don't know. He seemed wanting in the way that people want that pretty actress with the yellow hair. Miss Monroe? Yeah, that's her.
He fell silent for a few moments. Finally, I said,
What did he do? I ran out of there as fast as I could. I don't think he followed me. I don't think he can get out of the water.
Both of us took our toes out of the swimming holes. We sat there for a little while, watching the waves ripple in the wind. To break the silence, I raised my voice at him.
Well, lay off now, Tim. You nearly scared the bejesus out of me.
He said nothing. I felt embarrassed that I'd said anything. Eventually, we got our fishing rod and sat there, maybe for an hour or so. I remember we caught a few bream, but nothing exciting. I thought that maybe his story had scared the fish away, but now I'm not so sure. That was it. I got up to take a leak. When I came back, Tim was gone. I was rummaging through my old pictures in the storeroom when I first noticed her in them. To be honest, I hadn't noticed her earlier in the pictures. In almost all of the pictures, she was in the background, like a distant blur, but she was there. The exact same old lady I've been seeing everywhere since the past few weeks. In my school, at the grocery store, whenever I was alone. In a crowd, this old lady would just stand at a distance and look at me. She'd keep staring at me until I couldn't look at her anymore. I felt as if she was trying to say something to me. She looked peculiar, grayish, short hair, wrinkled skin. But what struck me most were her eyes. They were completely dark, and it felt very disturbing to look at her. Yet something ordered me to keep gazing at those eyes. It felt as if she was looking inside you with those eyes. I called my mom to ask if she was some relative of ours, and let her know that she had come to our town recently. I thought she'd be happy to see the pictures, but she turned completely silent. Instead, her eyes fixed at the old woman in the picture. On asking numerous times, she said,
This is my mother, your grandmother. She destroyed my life. I ran away from home when I was exactly your age, but I was pregnant with you. She suddenly appeared in my life again. She could have destroyed your life too.
But she stopped with a dreadful pause.
What, Mom? What? She died the day you were born. We went to her funeral, but we weren't allowed inside her house.
Then she took the pictures and went out of the room to burn them. As soon as she left, the lights went out. Looking around in the dark, I saw the same old woman, sitting in a chair in the corner of my room.
It's time you come with me now.
My brother and I were always close. He was extremely shy. He never invited over friends, and he always stayed in our room. Growing up, our parents were dirt poor. After third grade, we moved into a basement my parents rented. This meant that Eric, our parents, and me had to share one room. One bed for us, One bad for our parents. I never minded it, but Eric seemed to. It was around here that he started to change. Mom and Dad sold a lot of our stuff to make ends meet. Eric got it the worst. Pretty much everything of his was sold. His bed, his favorite comic books, half his clothes. I offered to share my bed with Eric, but he always refused. He said that he had trouble sleeping at night. I asked him why once, and he told me that he was afraid of dying. He heard stories of people falling asleep and never waking up again. He didn't want that to be him. I tried telling him that he shouldn't be afraid. We would watch over each other, but he'd always refuse. "I'll watch over you," he insisted. I'd argue, but I was never able to stay awake long enough for him to fall asleep. I felt bad for him. We weren't in any of the same classes. He never spoke to either of our parents and wouldn't meet any of my friends. He said he only cared about me. "We're brothers," he explained. "I just want to hang out with you." It all changed when we graduated. I got accepted into our state school, while Eric didn't even bother replying. It was then that I realized Eric wasn't the same brother I grew up with. Instead of trying to get out of poverty, he was going to ruin away at home. I told him he was going to end up like our parents. He didn't respond, only watched as I loaded up my truck and drove away. I really regret that. I shouldn't have said that to Eric, and I plan on making it up to him. Now that the semester ended, we can finally get back in touch. I bought all of his favorite things, his favorite movies, his favorite CDs. I even managed to hunt down copies of the old comics Mom and Dad sold. As I got home, I noticed something was off. Eric wasn't there. I asked my mother where he was, and she immediately started crying. I asked Dad, and he told me to get out of their home and never come back. I couldn't figure out why until I got a call 3 days later. It was my father. He said he was concerned that my countless voicemails asking about Eric wasn't a joke. And that's when I got the truth. Eric and I went to the park in the 3rd grade. Only I came home.